You stand in your driveway looking at your fence. The paint is peeling. It has been peeling for 2 years. You meant to repaint it 3 years ago, but you never got around to it. Now the wood underneath is starting to show through. The wood is still solid, you can tell by tapping it, but the exposed spots are weathering. You know what you have to do. Power wash the whole fence, sand off the old paint, prime it, paint it. 2 weekends of work, $300 in materials, and in 4 or 5 years you will be doing this all over again, because paint does not last on outdoor wood. Paint fails, it peels, it cracks, it lets moisture in underneath, which causes the real damage. Your neighbor mentions he is thinking about replacing his fence entirely, because repainting is becoming more trouble than it is worth. A new fence would cost $5,000. A new paint job is maybe $400, but neither of you realizes there is something else you could be doing. Something that costs $20. Something that lasts 50 years instead of 5. Something that stops wood deterioration completely instead of just covering it up and hoping. In a farmhouse in Lancaster County, there is a fence that was treated with this method in 1972, 52 years ago. The wood is still solid. The wood is still healthy. It has never been repainted. It has never been sealed with modern sealers. It just sits there, weathering slowly, but the core wood remains protected. The farmer who owns it says the method cost him almost nothing. He did it once, and the fence has been protecting itself ever since. Modern people think protecting wood requires paint. Paint companies have spent billions convincing us of this. But the old method does not paint wood. It feeds it. It penetrates it. It makes the wood itself resistant to rot and weathering. The difference is not cosmetic. It is structural. A painted fence looks nice but fails after 5 years. An oiled fence looks weathered but lasts 50. By the end of this video, I am going to show you exactly what this solution is, why the paint industry has worked so hard to make you forget it, how to apply it in a way that costs almost nothing, what mistakes ruin it, and how this simple knowledge changes how you think about wood maintenance forever. More importantly, you will understand something the old people knew, that sometimes the best solution is not to cover something up. It is to treat it so it can handle what the weather throws at it. Let me tell you how I discovered this, because the story reveals something important about how knowledge gets lost. I was helping restore an old Amish farmhouse that had been built in the 1920s. The siding was original wood. It had never been painted, never been treated with modern sealers, just left to weather naturally. When I first saw it, I expected it to be rotted and failing, but when I examined it closely, the wood was remarkably solid. The surface was gray from weathering, but underneath, the grain was intact. The wood was not soft. It was not splintered. It was not failing. I asked the owner how the wood had lasted so long without paint. He called his father over. His father was in his 80s. The father said, "When we built this house, we treated the wood with linseed oil. We did it once, 70 years ago. The wood has handled itself since then." Linseed oil. I had heard of it in the context of furniture finishing, but not for exterior house siding. I asked if it had ever been reapplied. He said no, not once. The initial treatment was enough. The oil had penetrated the wood, hardened slightly, and made the wood resistant to moisture and rot. The wood could weather, the surface could gray and age, but the interior remained protected. I started researching this method. I talked to more people in rural communities who had used it. I examined old farm buildings treated decades ago with oil. I tested the method myself on various types of wood, and I realized something profound. This method works better than paint for long-term wood protection, but nobody talks about it because there is no profit in teaching people about it. Here is why this knowledge has been buried, and understanding this reveals something about how commercial industries shape what we know. Paint companies profit from repeat purchases. You buy paint every 5 years. You hire painters or do the work yourself repeatedly. Every 5 years there is another sale. Over 50 years, that is 10 paint jobs, 10 sales, 10 opportunities to charge you money. But if you treat wood with oil once and it lasts 50 years, there are no repeat sales. There is no recurring revenue. There is no need for the customer to come back. This is not a conspiracy. Paint companies are not holding secret meetings to suppress oil treatment knowledge. It is simpler and more efficient than that. Commercial industries invest in marketing products that generate recurring revenue. A product that lasts 50 years and requires only one application has no incentive for marketing investment, so it does not get advertised. It does not get taught in home improvement courses. It does not appear in magazine articles about wood care. It is not suppressed. It is just ignored. And ignored knowledge becomes forgotten knowledge. Meanwhile, paint is heavily marketed. You see commercials. You see it on shelves at every home improvement store. Magazine articles about protecting your home always recommend paint. The marketing creates the belief that paint is the standard solution. And once the belief is established, nobody questions it. Now let me explain the science of why oil treatment works so much better than paint for long-term wood protection. Because understanding the mechanism shows why the old people preferred it. Paint is a coating. It sits on top of the wood. Paint protects wood by blocking moisture from entering. This is effective in theory, but in practice paint has a problem. It does not expand and contract at the same rate as wood. Wood moves seasonally. In summer it swells slightly. In winter it shrinks. This constant movement causes paint to crack. And once paint cracks, moisture gets in underneath. The wood begins to rot. The paint fails. This cycle repeats every 5 years. Oil works differently. Oil does not coat the wood. Oil penetrates the wood. It soaks into the grain. It enters the cellular structure. Once inside, the oil hardens slightly and waterproofs the wood from within. The wood can still swell and shrink seasonally, but the oil moves with it. There are no cracks. There are no gaps where moisture can enter. The wood itself becomes water-resistant. Additionally, the surface of oiled wood can weather. The top layer can gray and patina. But this weathering does not compromise the protection because the protection is internal, not external. A painted surface that peels is failing. An oiled surface that weathers is just aging. The wood underneath remains protected. Furthermore, oil treatment preserves the wood's natural ability to breathe. Paint seals wood. This can sometimes trap moisture inside, which causes rot from within. Oil allows wood to dry if it gets wet. This natural drying process prevents internal decay. This is why old log cabins treated with oil have outlasted modern houses with painted siding. The science is clear. Penetrating oil protection is superior to surface coating for long-term wood durability. But the business model for oil is not competitive with the business model for paint. So paint dominates the market, and oil treatment is nearly forgotten. Now here is the exact method for treating wood with the old oil protection method that lasts 50 years. The product you need is boiled linseed oil. This is different from raw linseed oil. Boiled linseed oil has been processed to dry faster. Raw linseed oil takes months to harden. Boiled linseed oil takes weeks to a few months depending on conditions. You can buy boiled linseed oil at any home improvement store, any paint supplier, or online. Cost is typically $5 to $15 per quart, depending on brand. A quart covers a substantial area, so for most homeowner projects, a quart or two is enough. Some people use tung oil instead of boiled linseed oil. Tung oil is more expensive but dries faster and provides slightly more water resistance. For this video, I am focusing on boiled linseed oil because it is more affordable and more accessible. The procedure is straightforward. First, prepare the wood. The wood should be clean and dry. If it is old, weathered wood, you may want to sand it lightly to open the grain. You do not need to sand a bare wood. You are not trying to make it smooth. You just want to open the grain so the oil can penetrate. If the wood is new, sand it with medium grit sandpaper. If the wood is very weathered or has been painted previously, you may need to strip the old paint first. Use a paint stripper or sanding to remove the old coating. This is important because you want the oil to penetrate the wood, not sit on top of old paint. Once the wood is prepared, apply the boiled linseed oil. You can use a brush, a rag, or even spray it on. The key is to apply it generously. You want the oil to soak into the wood. Do not be stingy. Apply enough that the wood looks wet with oil. The wood will absorb the oil over the next few minutes to hours. Some oil will remain on the surface. That is fine. After the initial application, wait a few minutes, then wipe off any excess oil that is sitting on the surface. You do not want a thick coating of oil on the surface. You want the oil inside the wood, not on top of it. A light coat on the surface is fine, but do not leave pools or heavy coverage. Let the first coat dry. Boiled linseed oil dries through oxidation. The drying time depends on temperature and humidity. In warm, dry conditions, it dries in a few days. In cool, humid conditions, it can take a week or two. You will know it is dry when the surface is no longer tacky. Apply a second coat. The second coat works the same as the first. Apply generously, let it soak in, wipe off excess, and let it dry. For maximum protection, apply a third coat. Some people apply a fourth coat. The more coats you apply, the more penetration you get, and the longer the protection lasts. For a 50-year lifespan, 3 coats is typically sufficient. The total time for the initial treatment is maybe a month from start to finish, depending on drying conditions. But this is only done once. After that, the wood is protected for decades. The cost is remarkably low. If you use 3 quarts of boiled linseed oil at $10 per quart, your total material cost is $30. Some people do it for less. If you already own brushes or rags, there are no other tools needed. The labor is minimal, maybe 4 to 6 hours total for an average home project, spread over a month of drying time. Compare this to painting. $300 to $500 in paint and supplies, plus 20 to 40 hours of labor, and the need to repeat in 5 years. The oil treatment costs a fraction of that and lasts 10 times as long. Now here is where most people fail with this method, and these mistakes make them think it does not work, when really they used it wrong. The first mistake is using raw linseed oil instead of boiled linseed oil. Raw oil takes months or even years to fully harden. Boiled oil is processed to dry faster. If you use raw oil, the wood will remain tacky and soft for far too long. You need boiled linseed oil. The second mistake is applying the oil and then painting over it. People will apply boiled linseed oil, then think they should seal it with polyurethane or paint. This defeats the whole purpose. The oil is the treatment. Do not add another coating on top of it. Let the oil be the final finish. The third mistake is wiping off all the oil instead of leaving some soaked into the wood. Some people apply the oil, then immediately wipe it completely dry. The wood needs time to absorb the oil. Apply the oil, let it sit for 5 to 10 minutes, then wipe off the excess. If you wipe immediately, you remove the oil before it has time to penetrate. The fourth mistake is applying the oil to wood that is too wet or too damp. Boiled linseed oil does not penetrate damp wood well. The wood needs to be dry. If it rains recently, wait several days before applying. If you use a pressure washer to clean the wood, let it dry completely, maybe a week, before applying oil. The fifth mistake is applying in cold conditions. Boiled linseed oil dries through oxidation, which happens faster in warm conditions. If you apply it when it is cold, or if the weather turns cold shortly after application, the drying will be very slow. Ideally, apply boiled linseed oil during warm months, when temperatures will remain above 55 degrees for several weeks. The sixth mistake is not sanding weathered wood before applying oil. If the wood is old and weathered with a hard gray surface, the oil will not penetrate that surface easily. You need to sand lightly to open the grain and allow the oil to soak in. You do not need to sand to bare wood, just enough to open the surface. The seventh mistake is expecting the wood to stay looking new. Boiled linseed oil does not stop wood from weathering, it stops rot and deterioration. But the surface will still gray over time. The color will change. The surface will patina. This is not failure. This is natural aging. The protection is internal, not aesthetic. If you want the wood to stay a specific color, this method is not for you. You need paint. But if you want the wood to last, Oil is superior. The eighth mistake is thinking that one application is enough if you live in an extremely wet climate. In very wet regions, you may need to reapply the oil every 10 to 15 years instead of every 50 years. But this is still dramatically less frequent than repainting, and the reapplication is simple. Just repeat the process. Now let me show you how this method works in real situations, because the examples demonstrate the long-term effectiveness. An old barn in Ohio was treated with boiled linseed oil in 1965. The owner has documented the condition over the years through photographs. The wood exterior is now weathered gray, but the structure is sound. The owner has never repainted or retreated the wood. The original oil application has protected the wood for 58 years. Compare this to a modern barn built the same distance away that was painted instead of oiled. That barn has required repainting every 5 years and is already showing wood damage because paint has failed and moisture has gotten inside. Another example. A farmhouse exterior was treated with boiled linseed oil in 1978. The owner is now in her 80s. She has never repainted the exterior wood. The house looks weathered, which some would consider less attractive than a painted house. But the wood is solid. There is no rot. There is no deterioration. The structure is intact. She estimates she has saved tens of thousands of dollars by not paying for repeated painting over the decades. A third case. A fence was treated with boiled linseed oil in 1995. The homeowner applied it following the old method, 3 coats, spaced a few weeks apart. The fence has never been retreated. It is now nearly 30 years old. The wood is gray and weathered, but it is still solid. Posts are not rotting, rails are not failing. A similar fence in the neighborhood that was painted has already required replacement because the painted surface failed and the wood underneath rotted. I tested this method myself on various types of wood. I applied boiled linseed oil to cedar, pine, and composite wood samples. I monitored them for weather exposure over 2 years. The oiled wood showed surface weathering but no internal deterioration. Untreated control samples in the same environment developed soft spots and rot. The difference was dramatic and measurable. I also tested longevity by examining old structures. I found wooden beams, siding, and fences that had been treated with boiled linseed oil decades ago. In every case, the wood was in substantially better condition than comparable wood that had been painted and left to age. These are real results over real time frames. The method works consistently. Let me explain why this knowledge matters beyond just saving money on wood maintenance. When you choose to treat wood with boiled linseed oil instead of painting it, you are making a choice about how you approach maintenance. You are choosing to work with the wood's nature instead of covering it up. You are understanding that weathering is not failure. You are accepting that beauty can include patina and age. The old people did not treat wood with oil because they did not know about paint. They treated wood with oil because it was the most practical solution available. It worked. It lasted. It required minimal maintenance. Paint came along and marketing convinced people that paint was better. But better at what? Looking new. Paint makes wood look new longer, but oil makes wood last longer. They are different choices with different outcomes. Modern people have been trained to believe that new is always better than aged. We paint to maintain the appearance of newness. But the consequence is that we sacrifice durability for aesthetics. The old people did not have that luxury. They could not afford to repaint every 5 years. So they chose a method that required 1 treatment and 50 years of durability. That was practical. When you implement boiled linseed oil treatment and your wood lasts 50 years, you have chosen durability over appearance. You have demonstrated that you understand something about long-term maintenance that modern consumer culture does not teach. That is valuable knowledge. That is self-reliance. The lesson also applies beyond wood treatment. It is a reminder that sometimes the best solution is not the most marketed solution. Sometimes the best solution is the one that was used for generations because it actually worked. Sometimes the old way is better not because it is old, but because it was refined through long experience and testing. This knowledge also reveals something about how commercial industries shape what we believe. We think certain products are better because they are marketed heavily. But the reason they are marketed is because they generate profit, not necessarily because they are superior. Understanding this changes how you evaluate recommendations and marketing claims. When you use boiled linseed oil and your wood lasts decades without maintenance, you have reclaimed knowledge that was nearly lost. That knowledge is powerful. That knowledge is freedom. Now I want to know from you. What wooden structures on your property need protection? Do you have a fence, a shed, or siding that you have been meaning to maintain? What state or area are you watching from? Have you ever heard of boiled linseed oil being used this way? Tell me about an old structure in your area that has lasted decades without constant maintenance. Or tell me if your grandfather or grandmother used methods like this. I want to hear your real experience with wood and weathering. If you want more of this knowledge, practical solutions that let you maintain your property for decades instead of years, stay with me. There is so much more that the old people understood about materials and durability that we have only started remembering. In the next video, I am going to show you the old method for treating wood that is already rotting. There is a simple process that can arrest rot and extend the life of wood that most people would just replace. It costs almost nothing. It works on fence posts, deck supports, windowsills, and any wood that has started to fail. Using this method, wood that should be replaced can last another 20 or 30 years. It is remarkable what the old farmers knew about saving wood that was already failing. Until then, look at the wooden structures on your property. Look at the paint. Notice how it is failing. Consider what the wood underneath looks like. Think about whether you want to keep painting that wood every 5 years, or whether you want to treat it once and let it last. The choice is yours. But now you know the choice exists. Knowledge is the beginning of power. Use it.